There exists a manuscript that Niccolò Machiavelli supposedly burned before his death in 1527. Whether the legend is true matters less than what it represents. A body of observations so unsettling that even the man who wrote The Prince, a book condemned by popes and kings, banned, blacklisted, and turned into a synonym for evil, understood that some truths were too dangerous to commit to permanent ink. Today we're going to reconstruct what those forbidden observations might have looked like, applied not to states and armies and the cold machinery of statecraft, but to the most intimate and most misunderstood arena of human life, the dynamics between men and women. Now, before you click away, understand something. This is not a video about hating anyone. Machiavelli never hated the people he studied. He dissected them the way a physician dissects a body, coldly, precisely, without sentiment, because sentiment is exactly what gets you killed in politics and destroyed in relationships. What follows are observations about human behavior under conditions of desire, competition, and security-seeking. They apply to women, yes, but they describe a logic that lives in every human being who has ever wanted something they were afraid to lose. Including you. Especially you. And here's my warning before we even begin. Some of what you are about to hear will make you uncomfortable. You will feel the urge to object, to say not her, not us, not me. Hold that urge. Watch it. Because that exact reaction, the flinch, the denial, the need to protect a comfortable story, is the very mechanism that keeps most men blind their entire lives. The men who see clearly are the ones who can sit inside the discomfort without running from it. So let's begin where Machiavelli always began, with the uncomfortable refusal to flatter. The man who built this knowledge in ruins. To understand why these observations cut so deep, you have to understand the state Machiavelli was in when his mind sharpened to its finest edge. He was not writing from a palace. He was writing from the wreckage of his own life. For 14 years he had served the Florentine Republic, walking among princes and popes and generals, watching the most powerful men in Europe make and break their promises. Then the Medici returned to power, and everything he had built collapsed in an instant. He was dismissed, accused of conspiracy, arrested, and tortured on the rack, his arms wrenched behind him and his body suspended by them until the shoulders nearly tore from their sockets. And when he was finally released, broken and humiliated, he was exiled to a small farm outside the city he loved, stripped of everything that had given his life meaning. It was there, in that humiliation, that he saw clearly for the first time. Comfort had never taught him anything. Ruin taught him everything. Because in ruin, he watched who stayed and who vanished. He watched the friends who had flattered him in power suddenly become too busy to write. He watched loyalty reveal itself as the conditional, circumstantial thing it had always secretly been. A man at the height of his influence is surrounded by mirrors that only reflect what he wants to see. A man in the dirt finally sees the world as it is. And that is the lens we are borrowing today, not the lens of a bitter man, but the lens of a man who lost everything and therefore had nothing left to lie to himself about. Keep that in mind throughout, because it explains the tone of everything that follows. This is not the voice of someone who hates the game. It is the voice of someone who lost badly at it, studied why, and refused to lose the same way twice. The refusal to flatter. Machiavelli's entire method rested on a single act of intellectual courage. He looked at how people actually behaved rather than how the priests and poets claimed they behaved. He wrote that he found it more useful to pursue the real truth of a matter than the imagination of it, because many have imagined republics and kingdoms that never existed and never could. The man who lives by what should be, rather than what is, learns his ruin faster than his survival. Apply that lens to romance and the entire sentimental architecture collapses. We are taught that attraction is mysterious and unknowable, that love is unconditional, that a good heart and pure intentions are what people pursue above all else. Machiavelli would have laughed bitterly. He spent his life watching people pledge undying devotion and then abandon those pledges the instant circumstances shifted. He watched alliances sworn on holy relics dissolve over a single advantageous marriage. He watched cities that wept for a fallen ruler cheer the invader who replaced him the very next morning. And what he learned about princes and republics and the fickle hearts of crowds maps with disturbing precision onto the choices people make in love. The core principle is this: people are drawn toward perceived strength and away from perceived weakness, and they will rationalize that drift with whatever language makes them feel virtuous. Nobody says I left because you became weak. They say I grew or we wanted different things, or the spark died, or I just wasn't feeling it anymore. The spark is a polite word for a power assessment that came back negative. The feeling that died was never random. It was a verdict. Understand what this means. The emotions people experience in relationships are not the cause of their behavior. They are the interface, the dashboard that displays a calculation happening far beneath conscious awareness. A woman does not decide to lose attraction. She experiences the loss of attraction as something that simply happens to her, like weather. But the weather has causes, and Machiavelli's gift to you is the ability to read the barometer before the storm arrives. The man who waits until the rain falls to understand the sky has already lost. The man who reads the pressure dropping has time to act. A test that reveals everything. Run the same experiment Machiavelli would have run. Take the relationship you feel most secure in, the one you would swear is built on something deeper than circumstance. Now imagine you lose everything that signals capability. Your income. Your direction. Your confidence. Your social standing. Your physical vitality. Your sense of forward motion through the world. You become someone who needs rather than provides, who leans rather than supports, who asks rather than offers, who drains rather than fills. How does the attraction survive that? Be brutally honest about the answer, because the answer is the entire lesson. The bond that depends on what you project is not a bond at all. It's a subscription, renewed quietly each month, cancelable the instant the service degrades below the cost. This is not unique to one sex. Men do exactly this too, simply along different axes. They drift when a partner stops offering what first drew them in. But the pattern Machiavelli identified is universal, and it is merciless. Attachment tracks value, and value is assessed continuously, never permanently. There is no point at which you have been chosen forever. There is only the present assessment, renewed again and again, every single day, beneath the surface of every interaction. The romantic mind despises this idea. It wants to believe that being chosen once means being safe always, that the wedding, the years, the children, the shared history form a vault that cannot be broken into. Machiavelli observed the precise opposite at every level of human affairs. Yesterday's loyalty is worth nothing against today's calculation. The person who relies on past devotion to secure present treatment is the person most reliably and most catastrophically betrayed, because they stopped competing for something they assumed they already owned. And nobody owns another person's desire. You can only keep earning it, or watch it leave. Think of the men you know who were blindsided. Not the ones who saw it coming, but the ones who were genuinely, completely shocked. The ones who said I never saw any sign, everything was fine, and then one day she was just gone. Here is the uncomfortable truth Machiavelli would force on them. There were signs everywhere. There are always signs. The barometer was dropping for months. But they had decided, the day they secured the relationship, that they no longer needed to read it. They mistook possession for permanence, and permanence is the one thing human nature never grants. If you're already feeling that resistance, that flicker of this can't be right, then you are exactly the person this channel was built for. Subscribe now. Because everything we are about to uncover only makes sense once you've made the decision to see clearly instead of comfortably. The men who master female psychology don't stumble into it by accident. They study it deliberately, the way Machiavelli studied power, without flinching from what they find. Make the decision to become one of them. The first truth: security-seeking drives behavior. Here's where Machiavelli becomes practical rather than merely cynical. He understood that human beings are not chaotic. They are profoundly predictable once you identify what they are optimizing for. Princes optimize for power and survival. And in the mating arena, a powerful and ancient drive, operating almost entirely beneath conscious awareness, is the relentless search for security, emotional security, material security, and status security, all braided together into a single instinct that is older than language. Watch how this one principle explains behavior that otherwise looks like pure contradiction. Consider the woman who insists, with total sincerity, that she wants kindness above all else, a gentle man, an attentive man, a man who listens. And then watch her, across years, repeatedly choose partners who treat her with cool indifference, who keep her uncertain, who never quite fully commit. People call this hypocrisy. It is not hypocrisy. The contradiction dissolves completely the moment you stop listening to the stated preference and start watching the revealed one. Indifference, in the brutal arithmetic of attraction, often reads as abundance, as proof that this man has options, that his approval is scarce and therefore precious, that he is not a man who needs to settle. Kindness offered too freely, too early, too eagerly, reads as the exact opposite, as need disguised as generosity, as a man with so few options that he must purchase affection with attentiveness. Machiavelli wrote that men despise what they can possess for nothing and crave what is withheld from them. He was describing scarcity economics, and scarcity economics governs desire as ruthlessly as it governs gold. This is the trap that destroys good men by the thousands. They are told, sincerely, what a woman says she wants: reliability, availability, transparency, constant reassurance, and they deliver all of it in abundance, and they watch the attraction curdle and die in real time, baffled, certain they did everything right. They did everything said. They ignored everything shown. And the gap between the two is where Machiavelli lived his entire intellectual life. Picture it concretely. A man meets a woman and there is real spark, real tension, real pursuit. For a few weeks he is slightly unpredictable, has his own life, replies when he replies, leads with confidence. The attraction is electric. Then something shifts inside him. He decides he wants to secure her. So he does what the world told him to do. He becomes endlessly available. He texts first every morning. He cancels his own plans whenever she's free. He agrees with everything, accommodates everything, asks permission for things he never used to ask permission for. And he watches, in genuine bewilderment, as the electricity drains out of the room. He gave more, and received less. He loved harder, and was wanted less. He did not understand that he had converted himself from a scarce, sought-after resource into an abundant, guaranteed one. And the human mind does not crave what is guaranteed. Consider also the way certainty quietly murders pursuit. The moment a person knows beyond any doubt that they have fully and permanently secured another's devotion, the urgency of pursuit evaporates. This is not cruelty, it is wiring. It is the same instinct that makes a hunter relax the moment the prey is caged, the same reason a goal achieved loses the gravity it held while it was still out of reach. The chase was the engagement. The wanting was the aliveness. Machiavelli understood this in the language of power and negotiation. The prince who reveals that he desperately needs an ally has already lost the negotiation before a single word is spoken. The lover who reveals total, unconditional, can't live without you security has, in that very moment, begun the slow and invisible decline of his own desirability. He has handed over the one thing that cannot be given away without consequence, the uncertainty that kept him interesting. The second truth: people calibrate to what you tolerate. Machiavelli wrote that men will always turn out badly for you unless they are compelled by necessity to be good. He did not mean that people are villains plotting in the dark. He meant something far more ordinary and far more dangerous: that behavior expands to fill whatever space you permit it to occupy. Remove consequence and you remove restraint. Reward poor treatment and you guarantee more of it. This is not malice. It is the simple physics of incentive, and it operates with mechanical reliability in every relationship you will ever have. The partner who begins testing, the small dismissals, the broken plans, the casual disrespect, the comment that stings just slightly, the eye roll, the late reply, the favor forgotten, is not necessarily plotting your downfall. More often she is conducting an experiment, almost entirely unconsciously. And the experiment asks one single, primal question: what happens when I do this? The answer you provide, not in words, but in your actual response, trains every interaction that follows it. You are, whether you know it or not, teaching a curriculum at every moment. If the dismissal is met with anxious accommodation, if you become more attentive, more eager to please, more visibly afraid of losing her, you have answered the experiment with the single worst possible result. You have demonstrated, with crystal clarity, that disrespect increases your investment. You have made poor treatment profitable. And behavior, the kind Machiavelli identified as universal, relentlessly pursues whatever is profitable. You have not soothed the situation. You have funded its repetition. You have taught her, in the only language that registers beneath conscious thought, that the path to more of your devotion runs directly through treating you worse. If instead the dismissal is met with calm, unbothered withdrawal, a quiet reduction in warmth, in availability, in access, a clear and wordless signal that this is simply not how one maintains access to me, the experiment returns an entirely different answer. The cost of poor treatment becomes real and immediate, and behavior recalibrates with a speed that will genuinely surprise you the first time you witness it. No argument. No lecture. No emotional confrontation. Just the silent operation of consequence, which speaks louder than any speech you could ever deliver. This is why the endlessly forgiving man, the man who absorbs every slight in the name of being good and patient and understanding, is treated worse and worse over time rather than better. He has trained everyone around him that mistreating him is free. And nothing in human nature respects a thing that costs nothing. Think about how you yourself treat the things that cost you nothing, the free trial you never use, the gift you didn't ask for, the help offered before you wanted it. Now understand that you become exactly that thing to others when you make yourself free. Value and cost are inseparable. Remove the cost and you remove the value in the same motion. Machiavelli's most notorious line, that it is safer to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both, is the most grotesquely misunderstood sentence he ever wrote. He was not endorsing tyranny, cruelty, or intimidation. He was making a cold structural observation. Love is held together by a bond of obligation that fragile, self-interested people break the very moment it serves them to break it, while respect for consequence does not depend on anyone's fluctuating goodwill or mood or circumstance. Affection is weather, it changes, it storms, it clears, you cannot control it. Respect for your boundaries is climate, stable, structural, dependable. The wise man does not try to control the weather of another person's feelings. He builds his house on the climate. The third truth: mystery is the engine of desire. Machiavelli counseled rulers never to become fully transparent, never to be entirely predictable, never to let their whole hand be read across the table. A prince fully known is a prince fully managed, fully anticipated, and ultimately fully controlled by those around him. And this principle maps onto attraction with an almost embarrassing directness. The single most reliable way to extinguish desire is total accessibility. The person who shares everything, who is available at every hour of every day, who folds their entire identity into the relationship until nothing remains outside it, who has no internal life their partner cannot instantly access and exhaust. That person has not deepened the bond at all. They have dissolved the very tension that made them compelling in the first place. They have mistaken merging for love, when in truth merging is the slow suffocation of the space in which desire breathes. Desire requires a gap. It demands something not yet fully possessed, something still being discovered, some chamber of the self that remains, even after years, partly locked and partly unknown. When you eliminate that gap in the name of closeness, you eliminate the precise thing that closeness was forever reaching toward. Two complete and separate people choosing each other again and again generate a continuous current of attraction. One person who has surrendered all separateness, who has poured themselves out entirely, becomes furniture, useful, familiar, comfortable, and almost entirely invisible. We do not desire our furniture. We simply expect it to be there. This is why so many relationships cool precisely at the moment one partner becomes most devoted, when they cancel their own plans, abandon their own friends, surrender their own ambitions, and orbit fully around the other person's life. The devotion is read, accurately, as the collapse of independence. And independence was the attraction. The man who had his own mission, his own world, his own gravity, and who chose to include her in it, was magnetic. The man who dissolved that mission to revolve around her became weightless, and weightless things drift away unnoticed. Machiavelli would put it plainly, the prince whose audience any commoner could secure at any hour was the prince no one feared and no one truly valued. Scarcity of access is not a manipulation or a game. It is the natural, effortless condition of any person who actually has a life of their own worth protecting. And here's the part most men get exactly backwards. They believe that if they could just demonstrate enough devotion, enough availability, enough total transparency, they would finally be safe, that the proof of their love would lock the relationship in place. The opposite happens. The more completely a man proves there is nothing left to discover, nothing held back, nowhere else he would rather be, the more he confirms that he has nothing else going on, no world, no mission, no gravity of his own. The proof of devotion becomes the evidence of insignificance. The mystery he dissolved in the name of closeness was the very fuel the closeness was running on. The mechanism beneath all three. Now notice what unites these three truths, because beneath them all runs a single current. In every case, the destructive move is identical, surrendering your position from a place of fear. Fear of loss makes you accommodate disrespect. Fear of distance makes you eliminate all mystery. Fear of being alone makes you tolerate exchanges that quietly drain you year after year. Fear is the universal corrosive, and the cruelest part is this: it cannot be hidden. It telegraphs itself in 1,000 microscopic signals: the slightly too quick reply, the laugh that lasts a beat too long, the apology offered before any offense was given, the eyes that check for approval after every sentence, signals the other person reads with animal accuracy long before either of you could ever put a name to them. And this is why tactics fail. So many men, having sensed some of this, try to fake it. They learn to delay their texts artificially while panicking inside. They perform a hollow indifference while their stomach churns with need. They manufacture fake plans and fake options while feeling, underneath, completely dependent. It never works for long, because the fear leaks out through every crack. Human beings are extraordinary detectors of incongruence. We feel the gap between what someone projects and what they actually are, even when we cannot name what we're feeling. The performance of strength built on a foundation of fear is more repellent than honest weakness, because it adds dishonesty to the weakness. The only thing that works is the real thing. Machiavelli's exiled wisdom, distilled to its hardest core, comes down to this: the one who needs the arrangement least is the one who controls it, and the one who is genuinely willing to walk away holds a power that no amount of pleading, performing, or purchasing can ever buy. This is not about playing games or manufacturing fake indifference. Those cheap tactics collapse the moment they are tested, because fear can be smelled beneath the performance. It is about a genuine internal state, the secure, unshakable knowledge that your well-being, your identity, and your sense of worth do not depend on any single person's continued approval. That security cannot be faked for long, which is precisely and beautifully why it is the only thing that actually works. The Reconstruction Protocol. Intellectual understanding, on its own, accomplishes absolutely nothing. Machiavelli did not write for the contemplation of scholars in quiet rooms. He wrote for action, for men with decisions to make and lives to govern. So here's how every observation we've covered translates directly into practice. Read these not as suggestions but as instructions. First, conduct the honest audit. Go through each significant relationship in your life and ask 3 cold questions. What do I provide here? What do I actually receive? And is the exchange balanced, or have I been quietly subsidizing someone else's comfort with my own? Most men avoid this audit at all costs, because the findings sting and the stinging feels like a wound to their self-image. You will likely discover relationships where your devotion vastly exceeds anything returning to you, relationships sustained not by mutual value but purely by your own fear of ending them. Conduct the audit anyway. Clarity that wounds is infinitely superior to comfort that exploits. The wound heals. The exploitation does not. Second, locate the precise place where fear governs your behavior, and stop acting from it. This is the single hardest step in the entire protocol, because fear is a master of disguise. It dresses itself up as love, as loyalty, as commitment, as simply being a good partner. But accommodation born of terror is not love. It is hostage behavior wearing love's clothing. The moment you begin acting from security rather than from scarcity, from abundance rather than from desperation, every dynamic we've described in this video begins, almost magically, to reverse itself. Third, rebuild genuine independence, and not as a manipulation tactic, but as an actual life. Friendships that don't include your partner. Goals and ambitions that don't depend on her support or her permission. An interior world, a mission, a sense of forward motion that remains entirely your own. This is what transforms you from an extension to be absorbed and discarded into a separate, gravitational entity worth orbiting. A man with his own world is never desperate, because he always has somewhere else to stand. And notice, this is not advice you follow to attract someone. It is advice you follow because a life with its own gravity is simply a better life to live, attraction or not. The attraction is the byproduct. The life is the point. Fourth, let your boundaries carry real, tangible cost. A boundary that triggers no consequence when it is violated is not a boundary at all. It is merely a complaint, and complaints are background noise that everyone learns to ignore. Decide clearly what you will not accept. Decide, in advance, what follows when it happens. And then follow through, calmly, without theatrics, without the screaming and threatening that only reveal more fear. Calm, certain, reliable consequence outperforms 1,000 desperate emotional appeals, every single time. The man who says little and means all of it commands more than the man who threatens loudly and folds quietly. Fifth, abandon entirely the project of being universally adored, and adopt instead the project of being deeply respected. The two are frequently and fundamentally in tension. Being adored usually means dissolving yourself into another person's preferences until nothing of you remains to object. Being respected means having a solid self that simply does not dissolve under pressure. And here's the paradox that Machiavelli understood 5 centuries ago. The respected version of you draws far more durable, far more genuine affection than the adored version ever could, because durable affection attaches itself to substance and strength, never to compliance and submission. Answering the obvious objection. By now you may be thinking that all of this is cold, that it reduces something sacred to mere strategy, that it strips the tenderness and beauty out of love and leaves only calculation. Hear the response carefully, because Machiavelli's defenders have been making it for 500 years and it has never once been refuted. Cynicism is believing that people are worse than they actually are. Realism is seeing people exactly as they are, without flinching and without flattery. None of what we've covered denies that love exists. Love absolutely exists, and it can be profound. What it denies is the fantasy that love floats free of all conditions, immune to how people are treated and how value is perceived and how attraction is sustained. The relationships that survive an honest reckoning are the real ones, the ones built on mutual respect and genuine, continuously renewed attraction, rather than on one person's fear and the other person's quiet tolerance of it. Whatever collapses under honest examination was already hollow before you examined it. You are not destroying love by looking clearly. You are clearing away the counterfeit so that the authentic finally has room to stand. There is a second objection worth answering, and it is the angriest one, that all of this is manipulation, that learning how attraction works is somehow dishonest or predatory. Consider how strange that accusation is. We do not call it manipulation when a person learns to be a better conversationalist, a better listener, a more disciplined and ambitious version of themselves. Every single thing in this protocol, independence, self-respect, boundaries, a life of your own, the refusal to dissolve into another person, makes you a genuinely better and stronger human being whether or not anyone is watching. There is no trick here. The manipulation is simply the refusal to lie to yourself about how the world works. The truly dishonest path is the one most men walk, pretending the rules are different than they are, and then quietly resenting reality when it behaves exactly as it always has. And note carefully, every single observation here cuts in all directions and spares no one. The man who accommodates out of fear loses respect just as surely as anyone else. The person of any sex who surrenders all mystery becomes invisible just as surely. Machiavelli's blade does not spare the hand that wields it. He included himself, explicitly and repeatedly, in every harsh judgment he ever made about human nature. So should you. This is not a weapon for looking down on women. It is a mirror for understanding everyone, yourself first. The freedom on the other side. Here, finally, is what this dark and forbidden knowledge actually delivers to the man who can bear it, freedom from the role of the perpetual victim. When you truly understand that desire tracks strength, that behavior calibrates to consequence, that mystery feeds attraction while fear strangles it, you stop being ambushed by patterns that were, in truth, always perfectly predictable. You stop interpreting a partner's drift as a baffling mystery or a devastating personal verdict on your worth as a human being. You start reading it instead as simple information. And information, in the hands of a man who knows how to use it, is power. This knowledge does not harden you into someone incapable of love. It does the opposite. It frees you to love from a position of strength rather than terror, to choose rather than cling, to offer rather than beg, to build something genuinely sustainable rather than chase something that flees you faster the harder you pursue it. The man who understands these dynamics can finally create a bond that endures, because it rests on the solid ground of reality rather than the shifting sand of fantasy. The man who refuses to understand them spends his entire life confused and wounded by the same predictable forces, over and over and over, telling himself each time that the next one will be different, that the next one will finally make the fairy tale come true. There is a strange peace that arrives with this understanding, and it is not the cold peace people expect. It is the peace of a man who has stopped fighting reality and started working with it. He no longer lies awake decoding mixed signals, because he understands the signals. He no longer performs desperate acts to win back affection that has already made its calculation, because he understands the calculation. He no longer mistakes his own fear for love. He has put down a weight he carried for years without ever realizing how heavy it was, the weight of pretending the world ran on rules it never followed. And in setting that weight down, he becomes, almost without trying, the very kind of man the world is drawn to. The freedom and the attraction turn out to be the same thing seen from two sides. Machiavelli died poor and exiled, his name twisted into a synonym for evil by the very people who lived by everything he described while loudly pretending to nobler motives. 500 years later, his observations endure, not because they are pleasant, not because they flatter us, but because they are accurate, and accuracy outlasts comfort every single time. Strength attracts. Fear repels. Scarcity creates value. Consequence commands respect. Mystery sustains desire. These 5 lines have not changed in 5 centuries, and they will not change in your lifetime, no matter how loudly the world insists otherwise. These are not commandments handed down to control you. They are simply the terrain, the actual shape of the ground beneath your feet. You can curse the map and keep walking blindly into the same pits, the same heartbreaks, the same baffling betrayals, as the overwhelming majority of men do until the day they die. Or you can read the map, accept how the ground truly lies, and finally walk somewhere worth arriving. The choice has always been yours. Most men never even realize a choice exists. If this gave you a genuinely new lens on how attraction and power actually operate, then subscribe and stay close, because we go deeper here every single week, dismantling the comfortable lies one by one, until you understand female psychology and human nature better than the men who keep getting blindsided by forces they refuse to even look at. The ones who command respect studied for it. They chose it. Make that same choice now, and hit subscribe before you go, because the next truth we uncover may be the one that changes everything for you. Welcome to the truth they never wanted released. It is harsher than the romance you were sold. But it is the only ground on which something real has ever been built.